This screencast is going to cover fundamental text modifications in InDesign. We're going to pick right up where we left off in our in-class demonstration. For the speed and the sake of trying to move things along, I have a document set up that's pretty standard so far. It's 8.5:11 portrait orientation with half-inch margins and an eighth of an inch or 0.125 for the bleed. Okay. I have the character panel and the paragraph panel both up and visible. Oftentimes you'll find these two particular panels nested together for the sake of the demo. Personally, I like to kind of pull the panels apart so that I can see both of them simultaneously, but your workspace is your workspace, and that's completely up to you. If they are not visible, Command T on the keyboard will show and hide the character panel, and the paragraph panel, the shortcut key is Command Option T. So Command Option T will hide and show the paragraph panel. Okay. So what we're going to do first is I am going to kind of cheat a little bit here for the sake of the demo. I'm going to grab my type tool. Let me pull my panels out of the way here. Grab my type tool, and I'm going to click inside the margin and drag the width of my margin, span of my margin, and I'm just going to type in the word headline. And I'm going to deselect because I'm going to create another text frame. And I can either grab the selection tool, or if I hold down the command key, I'll automatically get the arrow. So I'm just going to deselect off of the first text frame. Right underneath it, I'm going to create another one. So spanning the same width. And I'm going to type in the word subhead. And I'm going to do that, deselect it. And then if you recall, guys, in class we talked about bringing outside type that's been supplied by a client or your boss. So you have a couple options. You can either open that text up in a secondary application like Microsoft Word, or there's different text editing programs that will allow you to open up generalized text. You can copy directly from those applications and paste into a text frame, or you have the ability to utilize InDesign's place function, and you can place the text, a rich text file, or even Microsoft Word. So I'm going to utilize the text that we were using in class from the photos and text folder. So I'm going to utilize the shortcut key Command D, and inside of that photos and text folder we had that program spell check. So I'm just going to click open. That's going to give me the little thumbnail indicating that I have copy. So I'm just going to go right below my subhead text frame and click once. It'll automatically create a text frame to span the width of the margin, so it knows where the margin is on the document, and we'll take it to the entire base of the margin as well. Okay, so a couple things. We'll take a look at character palette first. So the first thing I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to highlight the word headline, and under the character palette, remember the character palette is really about font options and selections, and then also really about typeface attributes that are utilized by professionals and allow us to manipulate text in a professional manner. So from here, all we're going to do is I'm just going to change my point size, probably one of the most basic functions. I'm just going to bump that the whole way up to 72, and for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to change the font. And the nice thing, I think I mentioned in class, is now we kind of have this preview. So I'll pick something that looks, headline-ish. This is good enough. And 72 point, and then right below that, I'm going to highlight the subhead, and I'll change that font. Let's give it this lust display, and we're going to bump that point size up. I'll try 48 point. Okay. So we changed those two fonts. If you recall and remember from our demo, I talked to you guys about invisibles and the importance of having invisibles accessible to us as designers, because they allow us to see if there's any hard returns or soft returns. Remember the difference between a hard return and a soft return. So I'm going to deselect first, and in order to see those invisibles, the shortcut key is Command Option I. You may see these little pound signs appear here, and then I'm going to zoom in on our document, and you can see these indicate a return, 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 right? I start the mouse around, return. And this is a tab. These are tabs. And anytime I put space in between words, I'll get a bunch of dots indicating a space. And then if you recall, like we were able to add in a soft return. So a soft return would indicate a line break, and that means I hold in Shift and hit return. So this indicates a soft return, where a hard return indicates the start of a brand new paragraph. Okay. So with the copy close like it is, we're going to take a look at some of the features of the character palette. And again, this will be a little bit of a review. Remember that we talked about leading, and let's just change the leading here between this particular line of type. We talked about leading, and that leading is the space between two different lines that are top and bottom from one another. And remember, I mentioned that the leading should be +2 from the point size. So this is 12 point. We're at 14.4 right now, so that's pretty good. So I'm just going to bump this up anyways, just so you guys can see the difference. So when I push that up, you can see the spacing that occurs, right? So again, leading is the distance. Highlight the text. Leading is the spacing between the lines of copy. Okay, and again, as long as we're +2, we're pretty good. Okay, so leading is important to understand. Kerning is the space between characters. Remember, I talked about with headlines and subheads. When you take a look at the spacing differences between some of the characters, and typefaces and fonts have different characteristics based on ascenders and descenders, and these counter areas and things like that. So all these fonts have different characteristics, and when you're dealing with headlines and subheads, sometimes this information needs to be tweaked to make it look a little bit more professional. So again, for the demo, I'm going to open up this space here between the A and the D, and when you're dealing with the kerning, you just want to make sure that the cursor is placed there and that it's blinking. Alright, so when we take a look and mouse over on our character palette, you can see these little assistant flyout menus. This is tracking here, kerning here. With the tracking, it doesn't matter what I'm going to do because I need to be able to select it. With the kerning, we need to actually see the cursor blinking between the characters, right? So I'm going to expand that a little bit. If you guys notice, should have been a little extra space added there to it. So when you're dealing with headlines, like I go in there, so that's +10, going between this E and this A, and I would do the same thing. Go ahead and add +10, open this up a little bit, allow it to breathe more. It's a lot of finesse. There's no exact formula for it. Okay. So that's kerning and leading. With tracking is the spacing between the words of a line of copy. Okay. In order for us to manipulate the tracking, we need to actually select the copy. So this looks pretty bunched up. So I'm going to open this up a little bit. So obviously there's a difference between the negatives and the positives. So I'm going to push this open a little, 25, maybe a little bit more. And if you don't like the default settings, obviously I can come in here and tweak these and manually add in the numbers that I want. Okay. Once you have copy selected and you're working with it in a text frame, you'll notice up in the application bar we have the ability to stylize the text. So I can add in all caps. I can have a small caps, subscript, superscript, underlying, and strike through. Okay, so for the sake of the demo, I'm going to highlight our headline text, and I'm just going to change that to all caps, right? So a lot of times when you're looking at posters, uh, special events, sometimes the headlines are in all caps. Depends on the event and the venue, etc. So I'm going to select subhead this time. I'm going to select the entire thing. Now remember, in selecting text, I can either click and hold down with the mouse. I can double click and that'll select the word, or if I need the entire line or entire paragraph, entire line 3 times, entire paragraph 4 times plus. If I need all the copy, I can select inside the text frame, hit Command A. Okay. So we're going to go back to the subhead. I'm going to select this subhead, and we're going to choose the small caps. And you can notice that because this was a capital letter to begin with, it left it alone, and then turned the preceding characters into smaller capitalization. Okay. So you also have the ability to work with text, and these aren't necessarily things that I would always suggest, and sometimes the professionals wouldn't always suggest this as well, but you have the ability to vertically change the orientation and change the horizontal scaling of it as well. So just for the sake of the demo, I'm going to click and I'll push that out. So it kind of stretches the copy. I wouldn't necessarily suggest doing this all the time. It's not a professional technique that I've seen used heavily in the field, but if it's something that needs to be executed rather quickly, sometimes you can get away with it. A professional in the field is going to suggest that you find or try to locate a font that actually possesses those characteristics. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If I have utilized these, in a quick situation. So we'll do the vertical orientation real quick. So you can see how it kind of stretches it, right? Right, and we still have the ability to change the font or manipulate the character, the tracking, a kerning, anything else. We can change the skew. So select the word for, and I'll just put in a specific degree of measurement. Let's just say keep it 30 degrees and hit return, and it will skew or slant that selected copy for the degree that I have indicated. Okay. Last on the character palette, you have baseline shift. So in type and working with type, and you're dealing with like typography, and one of the common terms you hear is a baseline. And the baseline is where all of the bottom of the characters touch. So this is the baseline, the very bottom of it. The bottom of this P is what they call a descender, and the descender actually goes below the baseline. All right, and sometimes we want to manipulate a particular line of copy and take it above or below the baseline. So click, highlight the copy, and then I can adjust the baseline. So I'm taking it up 2 points away from the baseline. Or you can sometimes, someone will ask you to take a copy below the baseline. So I'm actually taking it below the baseline. All right. Obviously, there's the law of diminishing returns here, so too much of anything is not a good thing. But when you're tweaking lines of copy from an aesthetic or design standpoint, sometimes there's some tweaks that must be made, and InDesign provides us with a lot of those capabilities. So again, there's a lot of features available to you under the character panel, and then also when I have that text selected, I have the various stylization available to me as well underneath the application bar. Okay. When we're taking a look at the paragraph palette, this obviously has to do with formats the attributions of a paragraph of copy. Okay. Not going to go through all of these right now for the sake of this demo, but we have various alignments. Right, we can align left, center alignment, right alignment. We have justified, meaning that it justifies left with the left line. We have justify with the last line centered, justified with the last line to the right, and then justified is all lines. Okay. Indents that we'll be talking about: left indents, right indents. First line is the left indent. Last line with the right indent. We have a space before and space after that we'll talk about, and then space between paragraphs. The space afters and space befores are used so that you don't have to. Sometimes you'll see people misuse copy, and if they need an abundance of space, let's say after this hard return, a lot of times people will do things like this. That's completely incorrect and unprofessional, especially if we had to go in and modify the copy. If I had to change the font, it would change the spacing, and if I had an image or something or some sort of special feature or call out, it may interrupt the way that copy is distributed around that particular object. All right, so I'm going to Command Z that. So what we can do when you have a hard return, we can utilize features like space afters. So, and if I know a specific measurement, I can make this part of my stylization, which I'll be teaching you guys about character and paragraph styles. But again, this provides an open space without utilizing a series of hard returns. Okay, so that puts the space after the hard return. Excellent feature to know. And then there's the space before. That puts space before the hard return. Alright, so the hard return here, hard return here. Okay, so it looks like they're the same, but they do have different features. Okay, let me zoom out for you guys just a little bit. So I'm going to Command minus on my keyboard. And I'm going to grab my type tool again, and we're just going to select some copy here. Select this last paragraph, and just to take a look at the paragraph settings, I can center it. Here's to the right. Here's justification with the left line to the left, with the centered to the right, and then justified in general. Right. So these all have different characteristics, and they all have their place when working with body copy. It really depends on the requirements and the design. I know this is a fundamental text modifications. What I'm going to kind of tell you ahead of time is that I have a lot of young designers that like to make use of justification, like having all justified type, and I do have to tell you that I'm going to caution you on that. A lot of times it'll throw in some strange spacing, and you can see how we have a big time compression here, and sometimes it'll over exaggerate the spacing between characters. But so again, you're allowed to experiment with all these settings and figure out what works best for you. The one area that I'm going to tell you that I'm going to really be harping a lot about is hyphenation. Hyphenation is something that should be utilized in lengthy books and publications and newspapers where the reader is engaged in the document for a significant length of time. But when you are working with brochures, flyers, menus, you really want to avoid hyphenation because it distracts readership, slows readership, and comes off as being unprofessional. So a lot of times what I tell students when they start working, make sure that you uncheck hyphenation. So in an uncheck hyphenation, I always tell them just do a Command A, select inside, uncheck hyphenation, so that we don't have to worry about anything. Alright, so we won't see any hyphenations between words unless the word has a hyphen typed into it. Okay. So again, that is your screencast. on fundamental text modifications in InDesign.